At a networking event that we went to recently, a question came up about company size. Over a certain company size, does agility work anymore? It wasn't exactly that question, but it was very close to that. And it put a seed into my head that has only grown since that event.
Into a tree.
Right? About business agility and its relationship to company size. And Ed is here staging his residency on the podcast for one more week to talk about when a company grows, your business agility is strained. I worked in a couple of startups, and in a startup, a lot of people think this like a startup is chaos. And I would tell people, if you ever worked in an effective startup where you actually find product market fit, no, it's not chaos. In fact, when you run into something that is out of the ordinary, you meaning the collective you, will stop, decide how we're going to handle this. That will become the policy then. You don't need to write it down. It's in everyone's minds. There's a single digit number of people potentially. There's enough people where all the processes can kind of stay in our head as we decide them. We set the process, we move on. Now suddenly, we're a couple of years later, we're 300 people, 500 people, pick your number, it doesn't really matter. We're not all gonna stop and agree. Someone's gonna make an edict, this is how we're gonna handle this. Some people are not gonna be okay with it. Some people are gonna not care about it. Some people are gonna ignore it, right? Anyway, you've gone from this super agile, super lightweight group of people that talk directly to the customer and are focused directly on one thing, and now you've grown and you've got all these problems.
So I was also at that event, and the conversation that I believe, a statement I made that you chose not to dig in there, and that was...
Sorry, I was too busy screaming that nobody has strategy. I think that's what I was doing.
Oh yeah, strategy, right, exactly. But I was quoting. I went back and checked. It was actually it was in Tim Ferriss's book, Tools of the Titans, but it was an article that I was reading that referenced the fact that it was in the book. And I think it's an article was probably published around 2015, 2017, somewhere around in there. But the rule was everything breaks at multiples of 3 and powers of 10. So what works for 3 people won't work for 30 people, won't work for 90 people. And this is the example you're getting to, right?
Yeah, that's a great example.
And that's a phrase. So the rule of 3 and 10 is everything breaks at multiples of 3 and powers of 10. And that was Hiroshi Mikitani, who was the CEO of Rakuten, which is in Tokyo, and their investment group. And there was a product they did as well, I forgot. Anyways, ideally, the concepts are you have a process that you put in place, and this is what you're talking about. But we grew, we acquired, we grew again, we let some folks go, and we haven't ebb and flowed through this.
Yeah.
But at some point, something just wasn't working anymore. Right. Whatever that thing is, right? And I got some notes here on its benefits, payroll, accounting, sales, marketing, business systems, decision making, infrastructure,
marketing,
IT.
sales, yeah, definitely.
Right. So all these things break.
Training.
And somewhere along the way, someone is going, "Hey, something doesn't feel right. Right? Why are we struggling here?" And so if you stop and realize that policy was put in place when we were at this size, and we are now at this size, you can actually start to anticipate when it's going to break again if you understand the laws of 3 and 10.
And hopefully get ahead of it.
Correct.
Yes.
So you can be proactive,
Yeah.
but you can also be reactive and realize, it's because we grew, not necessarily because of the people. All too often, an organization grows, and that time management software they had when there was only 3 people putting timesheets in, it was sufficient. The reports came out were okay. But when you start trying to do it with 15, 20, 25 people, and you talk about growing the company, it just doesn't scale well.
Yeah. Or worse, you start blaming people because this is your culture now when you've gone from 3 to 30 people, and now maybe some of the leaders that you put in place, they're not the exact right mindset that you want, and they need to seek a reason that this is not working. Because what you just outlined was a problem with the system.
The system, right.
But
system thinking.
A lot of people are very bad understanding that it is the system that is a problem. Even in the place where the workers are the ones that are manifesting the problem. There's a difference between I have a problem because of a person and a person is experiencing a problem because the system is causing the issue. And people are super bad at detecting the difference between them. It's a very thin nuance that leads you to seeing the problem from one person to saying, well, let me step back and let me think about the, quote, system. If this is truly a one-time occurrence, this is a Deming thing about...
I was just going to go there. Basically, it is a Deming thing. Deming basically said that, right?
He said, I know I'm going to mess this up, don't attribute one-off issues to common occurrences when they're statistically out of the ordinary. Yeah, I screwed that up. Systemic issues, you're attributing to common causes. Ohm doesn't know how to work the machine, or Ohm doesn't know how to do check-ins or whatever. No, who knows how to do it? But because of the Byzantine check-in process that we have, only 30% of the time does it without issue. Well, maybe we need to look at our check-in process.
I have a perfect example of that. So, there's a system in place where if somebody wants to get access to the ALM tool, then only those that are admins can provide that access. And an email gets distributed out to the admins.
Oh, quick. The ALM tool, is it Jira?
Fortunately, it is not. But anyway, so everybody gets an email. All the admins get an email. And one of the admins have to just simply approve the request. So I happened to get up early that day, and I saw this request, and I know the person. So this person legitimately needs access. And I did what I've done in the past, which is click reply all and type the word approved and let it go. 4 hours later, I get a message back from a group, not a person, a group, not very well named either. So you can't really see who's in it. Oh. It just says, your request for approval was denied because an inappropriate response was provided. Yes. And down further in their email, there are a couple of buttons. There's an approved green button and a rejected red button. And I was supposed to click one of those and not just type approved. Oh. Still, it's a person that does the approval, right? So that person decided, well, no.
But you didn't follow the process.
I didn't follow the process. But I followed the same process in the past, and a different person who saw my response understood the word approved means approved. And they approved my request in the past. This time, another person didn't. Anyway, this is all coming back to the same thing, right? Your processes are too process-centric at this stage, and it's not the people necessarily.
And so back to I can give another example using the 3 and 10 cal multiples. Is when you think of when you say ALMs and project management and portfolio management, the tool that you use to manage 3 projects versus the tool you need to manage 30 projects.
Absolutely.
At a portfolio level. So Oma and I were on the same client one time, and we had to roll up our reporting, and the tool that we were using for our project management could not support the portfolio level that we needed. Yeah. And so we implemented another tool and put in some automation.
We added more process.
But we had to build a solution to handle the scale that they needed because the process didn't support this new multiple of growth that they were incurring.
Yep, absolutely. I've seen that too. Prior in my previous life as a project manager, I've seen that where the company was small. We had a handful of projects, so everybody used Microsoft Project. It was fine, and then we grew. So they implemented Project Server, and back in the day, it was, let's just say, not very optimal. It would really corrupt your projects, and that's what happened.
Resource leveling button?
Yeah, it would corrupt them unrecoverably.
Well, yes, that's a great point. That's a great point about that you need something, because I think right now I'm thinking of the ALM tools that I work with, and they are all inappropriate at the portfolio level. At the program, basically at a leadership level. So let's say you're a small organization. Let's say you're 6 people. You can get a ticketing system. You can start a Trello board with no process.
Oh, yeah.
It's just stickies on a board. Or Miro, for example.
Yeah,
it's like Miro. Truly no rules, no nothing. It really is just stickies on a board. And you can say, okay, well, here's our business goal. Win this customer. That's our business goal. A better example would be a company of 3. 1, 2, 3, the 3 of us, and say, okay, the 3 of us, our business goal is to win this customer. Okay, what do you think you can do to win this customer? Ed, what do you think you can, in your domain area? I don't know. We probably all work different positions in the company, in the startup, but we probably all have different skills, different things that we're bringing to the table, and we all can contribute something different to try to win the customer. So in the win the customer epic, we will each have a work item. We'll have 3 work items that lead up to a business outcome. We win this customer, we win this business, okay? So we have tasks that lead directly to a business outcome. Now, we turn around with 30 people. We go from 3 to 30, okay? 30 people can't have stickies underneath winning this business outcome. And in fact, the 3 of us now probably are the leadership team, and we probably have more than 1 business outcome we're shooting for in a quarter. Maybe we have 2. We're going to be reasonable, and we're going to have 2. I was going to say maybe we have 10.
Probably. That's reality.
We call them OKRs.
Yeah.
We have 10, but we call them OKRs. Anyway.
No, they're not. They're not OKRs. We're going for the
I'm going for the jugular, like OKRs.
So we have multiple goals now.
We have multiple.
We've grown.
And we have competing values.
And we probably have at least 2 teams. I mean, we're 30 people. We probably have at least 2 teams. So we have us. We have maybe some support staff, and we have at least 2 teams.
Can I add to that? With existing customers. We have existing customers and new customers trying to onboard.
Yes. So now, since we're good agilists here at this company, here at Brian and Ohm's second startup, because remember, we sold our first one.
That's right.
And we cashed out and broed down or whatever.
It couldn't buy a single yacht between us.
We couldn't, not at all. I don't even understand. But
there's one in the bay you might be able to raise.
No.
I can't swim.
Yeah, I can't hold my breath that long. The transition we just did, there's no one system that helps me do what we just did. We just said, hey, we're 3 people working directly on business objectives. Now we are the leadership team. We're still setting the business objective, just like we did before, except now the teams have to come to the business objective, come to the planning, tell us how they're hooking into it, present to us, let us move things around, to kind of talk back and forth to the team about how they're planning to hit our objectives. A little collaborative planning. We're still directly involved in that. 30 people, let's say there's 3 teams, and then some support staff, some other people, right? Those 3 teams are coming to us and saying, hey, we're going to do these things to hit the business objectives. We're going to review it to help them with their quarterly planning, right? That's the system we set up. And we can do that. We can directly come to their planning, all 3 of us, because it's very important, because we're setting business direction for the next quarter. Now we sell out again. We got PE that comes in. We got 3-4 more people on our leadership staff that PE has put there, right? Private equity has put there. So now our leadership team is like 7-8 people. Now we're 300 people. Now we've got, I don't know, maybe not 30 teams, but maybe we got 20 teams now. Or maybe somehow our teams have been broken apart. Now we're departments or whatever, where we've got giant departments.
Trying to use the same systems.
First of all, we're not going to be able to declare business objectives and then go to every single team's individual planning. And then, let's say we have 20 teams. So we're going to have 20 stickies, assuming each team only has 1 contribution to each business objective. We're going to have 20 stickies under the business objective. That seems outlandish.
It's untenable already.
And we're not going to be able to go to 20 teams' plannings, even if we wanted to. So that won't work at all. So if anybody needed a walkthrough of where this becomes untenable when you go to a factor, when you go to a 10x, I just walked you through a very real. Your leadership will now feel that they are no longer in control. Especially for the leaders that started when the business was small, grew to a certain stage, came up with a process that worked for them at that stage. Now the business is 300 people. Now we don't feel like we're in control anymore.
Them and their culture. The culture at 3 versus culture at 3 for also.
It sure
yes,
is.
Yeah. Indeed, absolutely.
And now we enter all the bad practices that come with bad management. Now enter command and control, now enter a PMO, all kinds of stuff that people recoil when they hear about. It enters because of all these reasons. How can we, the 3 founders of the organization, be sure that we're still in control of the organization, that the organization hasn't taken on a life of its own?
And all those systems, all those areas that I had listed out earlier, right? All those are going to break at roughly the same time. So it creates you're not just going to have turmoil in one area. It's not just going to be the sales team. Mm-hmm. Accounting and payroll are going to have issues, right? Accounting, payroll, sales, development, decision making. All of a sudden, everything is more painful than it used to be if you don't anticipate it. So you have to anticipate that those changes are needed, those changes are necessary. And the more you delay or defer making the change, making the decision to fix those real breaking points, the more pain the teams are incurring, and you're blaming the teams for those failures.
Yeah, this is directly identical to deferring maintenance on your car or your house or whatever. Okay, defer as long as you want.
It's called business debt.
However, don't be surprised when the roof is leaking and you have to set up buckets. This brings us back to Gino Wickman's traction, because when are you working on the business? Not in the business. Not exactly. In the business. Yeah, when are you working on the business? What is your cadence for that?
Right.
Oh, quick. Oh, wait, we have none.
So I have an experience of working with Traction, working with EOS, and filling out the weekly scorecard, but not taking action on the things that you're seeing on the scorecard. So there's the other side of it, like Chris said, was deferred, later. No, I need, these numbers don't tie. These numbers aren't helpful to me. How do we make them better? Are they the right scorecard numbers? So I've experienced it to even so. Well, we did the process, but was it helpful?
What we're talking about now, I feel, is continuous improvement.
Correct.
So and a lot of the topics we talk about on the podcast are nuanced. I want to throw out a challenge and see if like this is an open challenge to push back on me, because I feel that a lot of organizations that I've been in have been not nuanced on this topic. They've been black and white. You either are doing continuous improvement or you are not.
they would tell you otherwise. But yeah, I think if you look at it and just objectively, that's exactly what it is. There's a lot of lip service perhaps out there that we're doing these things.
Yeah, they know the terms. They've
know
seen them on
they're
social
collecting
media.
data, perhaps,
Right.
but not taking action on them. So ultimately, if you boil it down, yeah, they're not. But they feel like they are. They feel good about it, right? But they're not getting the result.
I'll give you an example from my experience about how organizations that get large and they become paralyzed, how they think they're making continuous improvement, but in actuality, they're actually not doing anything. Have you ever been in a large organization and they have a string of failures or a series of failures or setbacks, or they don't renew a certain customer, or maybe they don't expand like they thought they were going to expand, and then they bring in a new like department or division manager or whatever, and they have a big shakeup and they do a big org chart restructure or whatever. That's management feeling like they're making a difference by just shuffling people from teams. And people, if you've ever been on quote agile teams and you've had management mess around in your teams and move people around from team to team or restructure under certain team leads or architects, this is the company doesn't want to do true continuous improvement. They're not willing to talk about the process, but they feel by moving people around under teams under the org chart, they feel like they're making a difference here and that they've done something. They'll cash their check and they'll say success, and then they'll be done for 6 more months, and then 6 more months they'll shuffle your teams again.
I'm snickering sad. Somebody showed up on my team one time unannounced.
Please tell me more.
I was on the client site. All of a sudden, this person shows up. I'm like, what? I didn't think you were coming. I'm not expecting you. And why is this happening? So yeah, it happens.
It's like the movie based on a book version of continuous improvement. It's like something that they heard about the book that was really good, and then they just watched the movie because they couldn't be bothered to read the book of continuous improvement, rather than actually talking about the problems and taking them seriously.
Well, sometimes when you're raising the problem and you're actually trying to do continuous improvement, you're viewed as the troublemaker, the problem. You're the problem because you're raising the issue.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Yep. You're raising the issue. You're the troublemaker, and they take action.
Yeah.
Get rid of you,
Well,
right? Because you're the troublemaker.
That's the shoot the messenger organization.
Absolutely.
Right there.
And there are a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, all that gets you is a culture of nobody wants to say anything when they see problems.
Once you see one inmate, I actually worked for a gentleman who said sometimes
Did you say one inmate?
That's what I heard.
Yeah, but the phrase was sometimes you have to shoot a hostage, and that was how he kept you in line. But that was a phrase that was used by a business leader, and that was his judgment for once you get rid of one person, everyone else is going to get in line.
That's the fear-based mentality.
Out of everything we're going to talk about, that I think I understand the most. I understand why this management philosophy still exists. The Taylorism. I have the checklist. I know how the job's supposed to be done. If you're not following every single step on the checklist, I'm gonna go get my. Who do they have in Taylorism? Who's HR in the Taylor? I'm gonna go get the disciplinarian, and they're gonna wash you out. And because you have no education and no shoes and no whatever, like basically getting washed out of the company it's like the end of your life at this point, right? Because you have no other options. Globalism is not a thing yet. So you only live in the little town that you're in.
That's what happened. No, seriously, just to get human real quick. That's what's happening with some of these layoffs. Right now, some of these layoffs are affecting people's lives. I have a person who worked with me in an organization, not for me, with me in an organization probably 20 years ago on LinkedIn is publishing that he's about to be evicted. So just to be real quick, there are, when we talk about what it was like then with Taylorism, we're seeing that happen again with some of these layoffs.
Yeah.
So I just want to be empathetic to some of those folks out there right now that are really struggling, that were part of last year's large layoffs, with more this year, and hopefully starting to tail off.
Yeah.
Sorry to just bring it back, but wanted to pause from empathy for folks who may be listening to this. I don't want to make too light of that situation.
Well, you're absolutely right. It's real. It's affecting real people, real lives. Absolutely.
It's a leadership values question for me. You're Blockbuster, running the most efficient video rental stores in the world while Netflix creeps up on you. The product manager in me, that's my takeaway, is, my goodness, why can't you see that you're sailing the ship right into the rocks? Yeah. Like, what are you doing?
And so I was listening to a podcast today. I don't know who to credit it to because I've listened to so many.
It might have been the Arguing.
No, it wasn't. I'm sure it wasn't this one. But you may value the question that I'm getting ready to share with you. Yeah. The person said, "What is your 100%?" when you put in a week's worth of work, you have to know. It actually might have been a Gino Wickman podcast. I think it was.
Does he do a podcast? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I actually think, now I'm saying it out loud, I think it was one of his. I'll share it with you after.
I'm going to look for that right now.
Yeah, let me see. It should be. I'll pull up for you. But anyways, it's what is your 100%, and here it is. So what is your 100%? So for some founder, entrepreneur, their 100% is 85 hours a week. And if their 100% is 85 hours a week, they expect everyone else's 100% to be 85 hours a week. If your 100% is 55 hours a week, and then after that, your family time and sports with your kids or whatever, some people have to actually stop and think about what their 100% is, and then making sure that they're not allowing the business to encroach on that, or if that is a boundary, they set that correct boundary. But without it, you have leadership teams out there getting all over other people because other people aren't running the business. Other people aren't making the same salary, the same bonuses, the same. While we're all going the same direction for the same vision, our 100% are different.
Yeah. That's commonly what we these days refer to as the work-life balance, which I reverse the phrase and say it's really life-work balance, because we had life before we had work. But yeah, I agree with you. People aren't equating what their role is with their 100%. Because like you said, leadership, if you're an entrepreneur, you're fully invested in the company, and you're going to do whatever it takes. 85, 90 hours.
When there's an exit, you win.
Yeah, exactly. And you expect other people to do the same thing because you're modeling the behavior you want them.
You mean leading by example?
Well, in this case, it's leading by a bad example, right? Because you're not really being aware of what you're causing.
Yeah, that was a throwback to another conversation.
Yeah,
I mean, like that's easy to push back for me because again, like when I was in consulting, I got partnered with startups a couple times, and in the startups, let me think about a tactful way to say they don't value you unless they believe that you are committed to the level that they are committed, and like you just said, like they're in it for life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like regardless if they see an exit or not, like they might just be burn the midnight oil. They don't see an exit. You know what I mean? They're just trying to not have to fire everyone. They're just trying to make the next paycheck. It could be that. It could be like we like to harp on people all the time on this podcast about buying your next yacht and whatever. And most people like deserve it, first of all. But yeah, again, I've worked with those people that are like they're not making hundreds of millions of dollars every paycheck or whatever. They're close to zero on the balance sheet.
Some.
So yeah, and
the true entrepreneurs are pulling in nothing. They're sleeping in the desk.
And for those people, like it's their values come down to are we making a difference? What we would roll that back up to is customer value. You know what I mean? What is the actual tangible customer value delivered by our solutions? And they can really point to it and really measure it. And they can, like there's customer testimonials and there's things that you can do to actually prove you really made a difference. But also like those people that are like, you know, they're not, that whatever the opposite of phoning it in is what they're doing. Those people are highly transparent. They can't work without high trust. These are like leadership principles, which is, again, the opposite of where I was going, where I was talking about the organization blowing up, and now you got this whole management class, they're not really contributing anything. This sense of leadership value, what you said about leading by example, this management class, like the pushback they will give you is they will perceive this whole, let me run an experiment and see how it goes, as a lack of control. Or they'll say, well, you don't have a set direction. You don't know what direction you're headed in. So they'll take that as like a weakness of some sort. And I don't think that's right at all, because when you were a startup, like that intuition of like, I'm not quite sure this is the next step, but let's go look for evidence. Let's test out ideas on the market, directly on the market with customers. But somehow when you grow 10x your size, especially for me, going through that at a company I was at, when we went from 30, 35 people to like 300 or 500 people or so, somewhere in that range. Yeah, don't say like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to try it and show evidence. That sign of weakness, you might as well like have blood in the water at that point with the sharks swimming around, because the career managers that they brought in to run the company at that point would eat you alive.
At that scale, when you had 300 and you started with 3, the original really cannot do those things themselves, right? So these other people that they bring in, they're not vested in the same way. They're in their thinking and commitment. So they're going to look down and say, yeah, lack of direction, don't know what you're doing, that kind of thing. What do you mean experiment? It costs money to run these things, right? That's the mentality that it kind of gravitates down, and it takes away this whole idea of trying little things, figuring out what works and what doesn't, and preserving options.
Yeah.
Just gets rid of that.
And one of the things is when you find yourself in conversation with, well, when I used to do it and there were only 3 people,
right,
I didn't have a problem. Why do you have a problem?
Right.
It worked for me. Why can't you do it?
Yeah. You've lost the culture of experimentation that it takes to get a startup off the ground. And the funny thing about going through that, again, I've gone through the transition. The funny thing about going through that transition is like you don't even realize that you've lost it until it's like long gone.
Too late. Yeah.
You know, and now anything like I think of like where when you're going to product manager interviews, one of the things that you will ask is, or even when you're interviewing product managers, I guess it's on both sides. It's a very important question. Where do the ideas come from? Because what you want to hear, and everyone will tell you what you want to hear, but then you have to dig, right? It's up to you to how to dig. Right. But everyone will tell you, oh, they come from all up and down and inside and outside and left side and right side and whatever. And I'm like, hey, man, like I watch Willy Wonka too. Like, calm down. Like what in most organizations, when you grow to a certain size, like the ideas don't come from the teams anymore. Like it's a top down, like the natural progression is to push you toward feature factory type of like, hey, listen, kid, go sit in your seat and we'll tell you what to code. You don't need to do stand-ups, and you don't need to question business value. You don't need to look what goals to hook into. We have top people at the end of Indiana Jones right now. We have top people working on this. We don't need your contribution.
This is exactly so. At this stage, you've now started to slide down the slope of business rigidity.
Right.
Right. I mean that's really what this is. To the podcast that we're on, business agility and size. I mean, size is almost proportional to business rigidity. Right. The bigger you grow, the more rigid you get.
Right.
Unless there's really intentional efforts made to reduce that, but you still can't go back to the level where the 3 of us started the company.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
Can't, because there's too many people involved.
Yeah.
Well, the idea, there's a parable, I guess, but no man can cross the river twice, right? Because he's not the same man, he's not the same river. Right. Over time, everything you have changed, and so has the river. Mm-hmm. So you can never go back. So from a leadership standpoint, you have to make sure you're reinventing the culture and reinventing the organization, reinventing the processes for what you want. But to what you're described, I see a loss of engagement with the teams at that point, right? When we talk about, some people use the word empowerment, some people use the word engagement. To me, those are 2 different things. Empowerment is when a leader gives you power, they can also take it back, right? I own my own engagement. I'm either engaged or I'm disengaged. No one can make me or take that from me. Mm-hmm. So that's my choice. So empowerment's really cool because you gave it to me, but you can always take it back. But engagement is more of that teal organization where it's an organism. We're all in it together. We're all doing this thing and moving and fighting together because we survive together.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. So you said there needs to be an intentful rekindling of the culture, right? Mm-hmm. And entrepreneurs aren't necessarily the best qualified to do that at that
Correct.
point. They were gung-ho about something. It really burned in there. Like they wanted to get this done. Right. And that's why that was their purpose for being. But now you've grown to be 300, 3,000, whatever the scale is. Mm-hmm. The same 3 people, I don't believe, are qualified to keep that wick burning, right? To get the culture back to where it was when they were there, because the inertia is too big. You've got all these people they have to deal with to change the culture. The only thing they can do is, and I'm not minimizing this by any stretch, the only thing they can do is lead by example, right? Which they've done. And hopefully some of that rubs off on their 2 ICs. And they start to model the behavior they believe is coveted.
Sure.
And then they in turn pass some of that down. But it gets diluted. You just can't get that. You can't get it done that quickly.
And for culture, if we can, let's make sure for me, right, as I gave definition of power and engagement, culture is the behaviors you allow and accept. So as you grow to 300 people, what behaviors are you going to allow those 300 people to exhibit, and what behaviors are you going to accept of what they are exhibiting? And that becomes your culture, and culture is a lagging indicator. Those are the stories that people tell about your organization, and it's generally past tense. I remember when they did this. I remember when this happened. That's past tense.
Right.
So you have to be intentional to change the stories that are being told about you. Every metropolitan area has a company that either overpays for a bad environment and everybody knows it, and no recruiter can fill it until the salary gets high enough that someone is going to stomach that bad environment. Right. And so we know that it exists, but that's their culture, and those past stories are what's being told that's keeping the recruiting down. Yep. So without the intentional effort to get those stories changed, you're in a vicious cycle. So you have to be intentional as you grow to manage the behaviors and to also change the stories.
Yeah, in practice, the way that's done in practice often is through their policies and procedures, right? And those things can be controlled to a certain degree by people that started the company, but it gets diluted every layer you go down. The 300 to 3,000, it's hard. And you go beyond 3,000, it becomes an order of magnitude harder, right?
So would you use the 3 and 10 rule to be the trigger to re-inspect your processes and policies? What can we put in place to inspect on a regular basis, make sure at least we're trying to stay on top of it, as opposed to just ignoring it and just letting whatever happens?
Well, one of the things is be very aware of the licensing of your tools, right? So as you're growing, is there a limit on the size of the number of users you can have? And do you go to a different tier of pricing based on the number of users you need? So it's no longer $5, it's $15 per user. And so now when you hit that threshold, you've now increased your cost. Did you make a budget change because you know it's going to happen in August? So the last 4 months or 5 months of the year, your cost increased, but you didn't fix the budget line. And so why did we miss our plan? Because we didn't plan for it. So making sure that size, the amount of data storage that you can have, and the speed of the system, right? So is it going to slow down as you start adding more users to it? So just from a tooling part of this conversation is being proactive and knowing the tools that you're using and what are the economics of that tool, the performance of that tool. As you start to grow, is it going to be the reason your teams are breaking in their processes? Can you manage 50 projects in your project tool?
Yeah, absolutely. Very valid. I think the other side of it is also try and instill an organizational design so it makes it less rigid, right? It makes it easier for people to be fluid, as opposed to putting friction in place. And that's an intentional thing. You can do that to the extent it works. I mean, it's not 100%. You can't just wave a wand, but you can make changes to the structure of your organization where it is more amenable for people to be more lithe, right? More agile.
Would you set that up as like an on-demand pull process, or would you set that up to just automatically trigger your inspection phase at certain milestones? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I know what you're asking. Okay. I mean, going back to the rule, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to wait till you grow that big. You can constantly be looking at it, saying, well, are we slipping in any way? And make corrective action throughout, as opposed to, well, wait till we're 300 and then look at something and then put something in place. You don't have to do it that way. It's not a step function thing, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think the thing is to be aware that as you grow, you will have these pains. And then look at it throughout and say, what's not working today, right? You don't have to put a calendar event on. Just make it open for everyone to say, hey, you know what? I have this issue, right? And that should trigger something. We didn't used to have that. Why do we have it now?
Why are people so bad at this? Because I've met a few people that have studied, like a few people that are like doctors of organizational, like they have their degree in organizational design. Very few that are actually professionally in the workplace, like working as on behalf of the company of like, hey, I'm an expert in organizational design and I'm helping the company to work through the challenges of org design where they're at now, trying to get them to the next level. Like almost never I've met someone who actually is working on behalf of the company. If you go from the point where we were founders in the organization, and now we've 10x'd our size twice over, and the three of us are still running the company, and the company's 300 people, like we're all out of our element. We were all three people that had a specific specialization in our areas, none of which, unless we're running an organizational design company, none of us are experts. And then when we have a bad org design, now it is a challenge to our identity. We're good business owners and business people. We were running this company when it was 3 people, and now it's 300. We must be doing something successful. I will not take any kind of pushback against that. I know what we're doing for our org design, because it's an attack on my identity. I'm not going to say that's been the main thing that I've observed, but there has been a lot of, I'm going to take it personally if you're going to bring up the fact that our org design is not good.
Just going back to the question you asked, why are people so bad at this? Taking the example of the three of us, we're going to be focused on growing the business and not necessarily focusing on the culture, because, the culture is just what happens. People are around us and they're going to do what we want them to do, basically, until they're out of sight, out of mind, because now we're 300, 3,000. But still, our focus is, on running the business,
Sure.
growing the business, and not necessarily on fixing the culture, right? Or influencing the culture. It's not something you do every day.
Yeah. I have to hard pivot back to traction is there should be a framework where, yes, I agree with you. Yes, we are consumed with working in the business. We've got goals, super busy, etc. If you've been working in software development and you don't understand why you keep putting out successful releases and somehow the business keeps, like, there's this friction. Oh, it's because there's this whole other thing outlined in running a good business that's just not getting done. Your business leaders are just not filling a responsibility that they should be filling as leaders, which is, hey, we need to look at all the little connecting points between teams. Even in team topologies, there are connecting points between teams, and someone has to be managing those.
Right.
And if the people that are supposed to manage those absolve themselves of that, what's going to happen? Like,
back to traction. So we have with traction, you have the weekly pulse. With the weekly pulse, you check your scorecard, right? Financial metrics, turnover, the whole business on a scorecard. Right. How are you doing? Once you go through your scorecard, you start looking at your rocks. How are you doing your rocks? Are you on track or off track? Right. Rocks are things that every quarter, try to have 3, no more than 5. Big goals for the quarter that you should get done. That's part of working on the business. Right. And it's just, are you on track or off track? But are you doing those things? Then you get into your weekly to-dos. What was I supposed to do this week in order to move the business forward? That may have been, if we're using an agile term, may have been the equivalent of a user story, right? My weekly to-do could be a user story.
It probably is moving forward in Epic, but Epic could be rocks. I
would say Epic could be a rocks, right? But something I can do in a week's time, is probably a story. So I need to get this done, and it may be part of, let's say performance reviews. We're going to do performance reviews, but this week I need to make sure that the system is configured. We're transferring to a new system. We need to make sure it's installed. Make sure we've done some user tests, right? So there's all these things that go into doing performance reviews that probably take 3 months prior to the actual turning the switch on for people to do them. So a to-do item could be related to that. Yeah. Well, then, so we did rocks, we did quarterly, or we did to-dos, and then after to-dos, you do what are the issues? What are the issues that came up this week that we need to talk about? And then an issue is either a new to-do. We've discussed it. Right. So you IDS it. So you identify it, you discuss, and you solve. I think is the D, it might be decide. Anyway, IDS it. So you IDS it, so you either becomes a to-do or it gets put on for a later rock item or something. So that is, if you're using traction to run a business and you're doing that every week, yes, you should be working on your business and it should be a focus. But there are times where you go, I'm busy running a project instead of working on this rock, because that's how we're set up. We can't afford to hire the right number of people we need to run the projects we have. Our projects aren't long-term enough, right? So we keep bidding these short projects, so I can't staff to full staff in order to ensure that I'm not going to have to let someone go after 3 months.
The other great thing that you just pointed out is the concept that you have. Ed said working groups. I've broken down my org into logical working groups, where I know that, like, most of these teams are working with each other in a segment of the business or a corner of the business that really works with each other, and on the bottom line, they're contributing to the same bottom line. Okay, I don't know how many teams and how large that group becomes until you just say logically, like, what these teams are doing doesn't affect or influence at all what these other teams are doing. But I think if you could, like, have the AI equivalent of a coach segmenting your business, I'm gonna guess that they're somehow they're going to be around less than 150 people. I'm going to guess they're going to be less than 150 people working groups, probably closer to your max 120 number. We probably should have a whole different podcast about this particular subject. But
I have a question, though, because it's crossing my mind right at the moment that the majority of businesses in the United States are less than 100 people. But in the technology space, we're talking about business agility and things like that. I wonder what the most of the business size is. Is 3,000 a legitimate number for the scaling conversation of our business? Or is it truly 300 to 500 small to mid-sized business? But we still need to be focusing on, when we're talking about can we adjust as size goes in the rule of three, do we have the things in place to predict that it's coming? So how do we keep this from happening? Do we have the time because we're using something like EOS, and we have the teams that we have enough revenue that we can hire the right size of organization necessary to service our customers, such that the leadership team can service the business. We have the right culture so that we can delegate, empower with engaged employees, right? There's a lot of things that go into this perfection that when change starts happening, engagement becomes disengagement. Empowerment becomes command and control. You start twisting on the levers about culture that if you're being reactive, you're not being prescriptive in what you intend to do, you are going to miss it. So you're using 3,000, but I just want to say I think it's a much lower number.
Thanks for coming to my office, Ed, because this is the conversation I wanted to have that's very esoteric, that I think that luckily we saved it till the point in the podcast where nobody's listening anymore. And I wanted to ask, is that the natural order of things? Like in the universe, like entropy is the natural order of things. Everything breaks down over time, if not maintained to stay together. So like, it is the natural order of things reverting to command and control as we bolt on additional teams, add additional people to an organization. The drift is the natural order drift to command and control. And if so, if you peel back a layer on top, if you could crack it open a little bit on top and you look inside with one eye, is it Taylorism? Is that why?
If you want to talk about what drives entropy, it is when you have a value statement is to increase shareholder value. You're destined to have MBAs looking at numbers only, metrics only, quantifying, not qualifying.
You just went Taylorism on me. I just wanted to let you.
Yeah, but that's where So I'm saying yes to.
I mean, 1914 or whatever, 16 or whatever it is. It's over 100 years at this point of ingrained
successful organizations
in the business, in the education system, in whatever. Like it's permeated everything. Is it so permeated this way of working that it's become the natural order? That's scary, actually.
It is scary. I'm just thinking, yes is the answer. It has, I think.
That's why there are some leaders out there who say they will only work in small and mid-sized business. Once that next acquisition happens that moves them above 300, 500, they're out. I'm done. I'm ejecting. Sure. And I've been trying to get in line again. I was in line at one point, and it's hard. But I believe that someone once told me, closer to the top you get, the closer to the door you get. Mm-hmm. And as acquisition starts happening, acquisitions are about capital, about the raise, about the exit. And as those become the decisions, that becomes the focus. Yep. There are some really great PE groups out there that build some very nice businesses that are phenomenal when it comes time for the sale. And there's some that when the sale starts to get close, they start backing off, withholding, and the team suffer. And then you start having turnover and culture changes and people aren't happy anymore. Yep. And as soon as the acquisition happens, the sentiment is it's not the same company. And that's happened here locally to some of the brands that used to be phenomenal brands that somewhere along the way, something happened to their culture that the stories you hear on the street aren't what they used to be.
And relate to some of those, in the area, for sure. I'm just thinking like large companies like GE, for example, right? GE is not a company.
No.
It's a holding company that has all of these companies.
Right.
Is it feasible, even theoretically, that each of these companies could run as lean companies? They're small enough, whatever that means, that they can run to the point where they can almost like define their own culture.
Short answer.
And so if that happens, then you can kind of take that down to the next level of abstraction, right?
Sure.
So GE makes appliances, and then I'm sure there's a lower breakdown of that somehow. Like they make X and Y, refrigerators and dishwashers or whatever, appliances. Or maybe that's not a great example, but another level of abstraction. And even those little companies can have their own cultures. Yeah. If you're doing that, then GE as a whole is deemed to be successful, right? Mm-hmm. Because all of these be successful. Maybe not all, but most. Right? Is that utopia or is that something that can happen? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, thinking scale, right? Scale. So I'm thinking about large companies. GE came to mind, could be any company. If they break down their units, right? And then instill that culture of, yes, we're still a small company. We're going to operate this way, as autonomous as possible.
So where you were going was, it is possible to break down a large organization into logical small segments that can manage themselves appropriately. So Ed, you had a suggestion here.
Yeah, I pulled up my Kindle book of Reinventing Organizations once again. I did a talk on it probably 5-6 years ago was when I was introduced to it. People were really talking about teal organizations, like what's a teal organization? So I found the book, read the book. But what Owen was asking was, can organizations work in smaller units? And I was saying yes. And one of the examples in the book was Bertsorg has 9,000 people. But
what's the name of the organization?
I believe it's Bertsorg, Burtzorg. And it has 9,000 people, but no one is the boss of anyone else, right? And so it takes a certain dynamic, a certain culture, a certain belief system to the core of everyone in that organization to make that work. As soon as someone shows up with ego and is the first person to say, I'm the boss of you, I don't have to listen. And then some of them say, I don't have to listen to you. And that's an extreme independence.
Sure.
Then one person is trying to extreme independent and one person is trying to be the boss. I'm looking at those of extremes. Then that culture starts to break. So you have to have that value in you, that internal the drive that I'm going to help make this work. I am engaged and I believe, I'm buying in, and we all are. But as soon as someone says I'm the boss, it changes it.
You know, as a product manager on the podcast, I've not contributed much in the way of product management on this podcast, but I feel what I can add today is when you have solid goals that are visible, a company mission that is visible to everyone, that everyone really believes in, and when your leadership lives the values, it's easy to do what you're saying. Like, oh my goodness, how can you align 9,000 people? Actually, it's kind of easy. If your mission of your organization, your vision for what the future might look like, are big and bold, and it's honestly, it's not that difficult to attract people.
I have a bad bias on mission because there was a comedian by the comedians. He was actually a speaker. He was a motivational speaker, a demotivational speaker. Oh. Yeah, he was the pit bull of motivation. Anyways, this is his own branding. But Larry Wingett, back in 2004, I heard him speak. And one of the things he did is he took the Dunder Mifflin, the office. He took their mission statement, removed Dunder Mifflin, and moved the reference to paper, and said, how many people have a mission statement that sounds like this? And everyone's like, oh, it's great. Rah. So even a fictional comedic company write a really good mission statement. So mission statements, sometimes to me, I roll all the way back to the comedian making fun of it because sometimes it's not worth the paper it's written on.
I understand. However, it's one thing to this is like when we say, well, your leadership has to really embody the values. Like, this is one of the things. It's like people, especially the younger the people, I feel the more they can detect if your words do not match your actions. Yep. It's immediately you're not authentic. And people will cash out, and that's the type of organization you'll get almost overnight.
They've got to model the behavior they want. Absolutely, right? I believe that. A company that is like Bertsorg, that nobody's the boss of anyone else. Their organizational structure is more flat, I imagine, right? Maybe more like a holacracy. There aren't too many of them out there, I want to say.
No.
I mean, I'm trying to think about some of them. Maybe, I don't know, Zappos comes to mind. I don't know who else.
To be flat like that, you probably have to be distributed.
Or product line or something.
Product line, something like
in
that.
the book, one of the examples was nursing. It was an overseas nursing. I believe it was in the UK. They had 50 nurses in this neighborhood area.
Sure.
And they would actually go sit and have coffee and get to know these elderly patients, and more so than just a doctor's checkup. They actually got to see them in their environment. They got to visit with them. And it became a whole health thing where the patients didn't have to go to the hospital as often. Mm-hmm. Their sense and value went up, all because these nurses were empowered to function within the space that was necessary to make their patients better, not to meet a financial number. Okay. But yet the benefits actually drove cost of healthcare down because those patients weren't actually going in. Right. So it's been a while since I read those sections, but it's a book that came up via our conversation.
The predictable success. Like, we're gonna refresh ourselves on that one, and we're gonna have a future podcast on that one. We'll do one just on that book, and Ed, I want to have you back to do one on extreme ownership as well. So there's 2 book reviews that I want to do.
Any books you want to do, I'm here, man.
Yeah. Well, this sounds like a great future podcast.
It does indeed.
And what should they do, Om? I'll catch you when you're sipping.
Sorry.
Can't be caught sipping.
Not slipping, just sipping. And kind of just taking it all in, thinking already for the next podcast when we talk about.
I would like it to subscribe. I was trying to cue you up
I
want to try that again?
If you're still listening, first of all, thank you to both of you. And like and subscribe our podcast. Let us know other topics you'd like us to delve into.
That's right.